Pandits, my friends that are online, and all fellow Aryas, a very warm welcome to everyone on this very hot evening, very hot Durban evening, as we gather today for the final presentation of our Back to the Veda series for 2024. This insightful series is proudly brought to you by Ved Niketan, which is a standing committee of the Arya Samaj of South Africa. Let us continue this enriching journey back to the roots of our Vedic wisdom, presented to us today by Pujya Swamiji Dayanand Saraswati. The topic of discussion today is the relevance of Swami Dayanand's teachings and approaches to us in South Africa. I think that's going to be a very interesting topic, Swamiji. Before I hand you over to Swamiji, I would like to read a little CV of Swamiji. And before that, let's please lay some ground rules, housekeeping. We will mute our devices. We will have questions and answers at the end of the session, unless Swamiji asks for discussion in between. We can post our chats and comments on the chat box, comments and questions in the chat box, or you may raise your hands. So let me just give you a little CV on Swamiji. Swamiji, it's a little CV. We know you're quite a big, vast character. So I hope I do justice. Okay, so Swamiji was born in Pietermaritzburg. He was educated in Pietermaritzburg. And then he was initiated into the Order of Sannyas in June 2016 in Rishikesh at the Parmat Niketan under His Holiness Swami Chidanand Saraswati Ji. Some of the key designations, past and present: Swamiji is the co-founder and the head of the Sannyas Spiritual Council of South Africa, spiritual head of Arya Samaj South Africa from 2019 to 2024. He was the head of the Arya Samaj Vedic Sannyas Mandal, trustee of the Sannyas Dharma Welfare Trust. Contributions and focus: Swamiji is a transformative spiritual leader with a mission to promote Hindu unity and Sanatan Dharma globally. His initiatives include fostering youth empowerment, mentoring, and interfaith collaborations. He has represented Hinduism at numerous national and international forums and authored 3 books on Vedic knowledge and vegetarianism. Some achievements and milestones of Swamiji include, and is not limited to, the early leadership. He founded and led the youth and cultural organizations such as the Vedic Hindu Youth League from 2004 to 2007 and the Veda Dharma Sabha 2009 to 2014. Served as a chairman of the Pretoria Boys High School Arts and Culture Department in 2007. Global representation and advocacy, delivered a paper on the Vedas and vegetarianism at the World Vedic Conference in New Delhi in 2017. He was invited to global forums, including conferences in Ecuador in 2019, South Korea and Thailand, both in 2023. Books authored are Vedic Nectar, Daya, an Ocean of Compassion, and the Little Vedic Book of Treasures. And he was a voice we've heard on Hindwani from 2020 to 2024. Some of the youth empowerment programs: actively worked with youth in Mauritius in 2024, this year current, addressing issues such as peer pressure, academic religious balance, and substance abuse using Vedic teachings. Notable initiatives: Swamiji co-founded the Sannyas Spiritual Council of South Africa to unite Hindu sannyasis. He engaged with interfaith organizations, including Religions for Peace and HWPL. I'm not sure, Swamiji, you must enlighten us on that. Chief guest at numerous global Hindu and interfaith events across countries such as Canada, the United States of America, India, Kenya, and Mauritius. Swamiji is recognized for his efforts to preserve and propagate Hindu values while fostering interfaith harmony and addressing contemporary challenges facing youth. So, Swamiji, over to you to address us on the relevance of Swami Dayanand's teachings and approaches to us in South Africa. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Thank you so much, Pandit Vishaka ji, and all my beloved embodiments of peace and love. My namaste to each and every one of you. May I take this opportunity to thank our Vedniketan subcommittee for affording me the opportunity to deliver this Back to the Vedas concluding lecture for 2024. This year, my friends, has indeed been a fulfilling one, with the series covering a range of topics geared towards celebrating the 200th birth anniversary of our dearest Maharishi Dayanand Saraswati ji, founder of the Samaj, and rendering the relevance of the Samaj in the 21st century. But it also formed the prelude to our centenary celebrations and 150 years of the establishment of the Samaj next year. My focus this evening is to highlight the relevance of Maharishi Dayanand ji's teachings and approaches to us, particularly in South Africa. Now, whilst much of this pertains to South Africa, we also have an array of online guests that are beyond these shores and that are also part of the Samaj family. And my hope is that you will use today's discussion to be able to understand the impact, the influence, and relevance in your own country, because the world has become so much more smaller. The world is far much more reachable than it was 20, 30 years ago. And as a result, much of the challenges we face today are pretty much the same challenges you would face in your part of the world, with the only difference being minor issues here and there. But by and large, my topic today will also affect you going forward. In this presentation, my friends, I ask you to please have an open mind, as much of the questions I may pose require us to actively and rationally engage over so as to pave our direction forward. And as always, I mean everything with the greatest of respect, without any form of disrespect or hate at all. This is also that we can grow together and move forward together, taking Maharishi ji's mission forward. To begin with, I think it's important for us to understand what Swamiji's teachings are and how his philosophy contributes towards spiritual and social change. First and foremost, it's fundamental to understand that Swamiji's teachings is the teachings of the Vedas. Plain and simple. He didn't advocate any philosophy or any other teaching that was outside the scope or that contradicted the Vedas in any way. Vedas was his ultimate authority, and everything else that he did was an expansion or commentary on Aparushaya itself. However, what is unique about Swamiji is that he taught us the Vedas as a practical tool to guide human living and spiritual transformation, though his emphasis was guiding righteous human living and fighting against superstition and blind faith due to the challenges of his time and the subjugation of our forebears in Bharat and the threat of the annihilation of their language, culture, tradition, and their understanding of Sanatana Vedic Dharma. Swamiji was an intrepid warrior of social and spiritual reform. He unprecedentedly took effective measures for women education and empowerment and eradication of social discrimination. His work and idea will forever remain relevant, not only for Indian society, but for the entire world. Incidentally, when I was in Mauritius and I addressed the students and I saw a room almost 3/4 filled of female students, and I reminded each and every one of them that they are here today able to get that education and able to make a name for themselves because of the efforts of Swami Dayanand, who courageously, without fear or favor, stood and fought for their right to exist, their right to be educated, and their right to be equal. His statement of beliefs as written in the Satyat Prakash sets the tone for the philosophy and direction of the Arya Samaj, which he founded in 1875 with a clear warning to the followers at the time of its foundation. And he said, and I quote, "If you are able to achieve something for the good of mankind by a new Samaj, then establish a Samaj. I will not stand in your way. However, If you do not organize it properly, there will be a lot of trouble in the future. As for me, I will only instruct you in the same way as I teach others, and this much you should keep clearly in mind. My beliefs are not unique, and I am not omniscient. Therefore, if in the future any error of mine should be discovered after rational examination, then set it right. If you do not act in this way, then this Samaj too will later become just another sect. Unquote. Think about that for a moment. Think about the power behind that statement. A Maharishi, not an ordinary individual, but with such humility to recognize the importance of progress, the importance of change, the realization of the fundamental eternal principles which do not change, but the way in which they are approached and the necessity for the approaches to change. Swamiji impressed on critical progressive thinking and analysis through rational exposition. He was not founding a new religion or sect, but Swamiji was suggesting how one should follow one's own dharma on the basis of positive and universal values. For the Arya Samaj, he gave us 10 principles that echo his statement of beliefs and are true, rational, and universal for any community, any race, and any organization. The cusp of his beliefs are the belief in Vedic principles, the belief in one almighty, formless, all-powerful, and ever-pervading almighty God known as Om. His belief in social reform. He was a social reformer that advocated for liberation of people through the teachings of the Vedas. His belief in rationality, the importance of rational critical thinking and scientific temper. Individual liberty, the importance of education, particularly the education of every child. And importantly, righteous governance. Then he cast that into forming the 10 principles of the Arya Samaj. Yes, there were principles before that, the initial principles, but later on he cast it into 10 principles. The first 3 being spiritual and inwardly transformative in nature, the belief in one God, belief in Vedas, and the attributes of that God. But then principles 4 to 10 are everything about who we are, how we express ourselves, our belief system, our conduct in society, our building of society. Because unless we get this body and this life straight, our spiritual path will never come to order. This was the beauty of Maharishi Dayanand in being able to create a society that aligns the rest of society along the path of social justice, righteousness, and spiritual evolution through the knowledge of the Vedas. Now let's come home. Historically speaking, the Arya Samaj was introduced, as many of you know, to South Africa through the arrival of our Vedic missionaries, particularly Professor Bhai Parmananji and then Swami Shankarananji Maharaj, who officially established the first Arya institutions in the then name of Vedram Sabhas. Incidentally, next year, one of those first institutions, the Vedram Sabha of Pietermaritzburg, will celebrate 115 years. Oh, sorry, at the end of this year, rather. My apologies. Swamiji's fight for freedom, both social and spiritual, was ingrained within the hearts of all those who experienced oppressive times and influenced some of the key figures in South Africa's freedom struggle. And thus the Arya Samaj played an important role in the struggle for freedom in this country. Imagine, they didn't even lay eyes on Swami Dayanand, but Swamiji's vigor had influenced them so much and inspired them so much that today's fight for our liberation, the Arya Samaj stands tall as having been part of that mission. As we would gather from Swamiji's teachings and the principles of the Samaj that he laid down, the question lies, my friends, what is the responsibility and mandate of not just the Samaj as an institution, but as members of the Samaj? For some reason over the years, we have become a separately identifiable unit and philosophy. But surely that's against the grain of what Swamiji advocated, since the Samaj was founded as an association of like-minded individuals, pious individuals, whose primary focus was spreading the Vedic way of universal living based on the fundamental humanism that unifies us and not divides us. Ours is not an Arya Samaj ideology or philosophy. It can only be a Vedic ideology or philosophy. We can't take ownership of the Vedas that it belongs to Arya Samaj alone, but we must be able to live by, understand, and carry the message so that it belongs to all mankind across the linguistic, cultural, traditional, and racial divide. For that, we have to separate our individual identity and embrace the principles of Dayanandji as a collective. And that means, my friends, our work becomes twofold. The first pertains to the first three principles of the Samaj and the core belief base of Swamiji, and how we spread the message of one formless God and the message of the Vedas. This in a South African and global society that does not just have a larger diverse Hindu community of different schools of thought, but also a society in which interfaith dialogue and work is becoming more and more necessary to engage in for societal harmony. Now, on this point, we must remember that we are in a democratic country, a democracy that we fought for, and one that embraces everyone who lives in it. Swamiji says again in his statement of beliefs, and I quote, "May the grace of Almighty God and cooperation of the men of learning and piety help in the promulgation of these principles on the whole of the globe, so that all persons may obtain the fourfold boon of righteousness, prosperity, happiness, and salvation, and may lead a happy and progressive life," unquote. And the 10th principle of the Samaj says that we must subordinate ourselves to the rule of law and society. And in our case, this would mean South African law. Thus, our work and approach as a South African Arya Samaj will differ from that of our India and other places with respect to local prevailing circumstances. But by Vedic and Arya Samaj principles, our work should be aligned and should not be compromised. This being said, we cannot, perhaps like in the past, advocate the Arya Samaj mission and Vedic philosophy in a way that criticizes or creates disharmony between ideologies prevalent within our Hindu community. It is our responsibility to guide the Vedic understanding from the position that people are in, and in a way that embraces them as part of a larger diverse community, acknowledging that which unites us and is common to us all, rather than clearly showing lines that make us distinct. Now, whatever the other philosophies may be, right or wrong or irrelevant, is not for us to delve into. Our focus should be ensuring our progressive relevance in approaching and achieving the ideals of Vedic wisdom. This means, my friends, that we have to enter into a discussion which also includes how we approach the Satyar Prakash and our promotion of it based on later chapters, which includes a critical analysis of Hindu ideologies and other religions. This internal dialogue needs to reflect how our approach is with respect to interfaith harmony and inter-Hindu harmony without compromising the Vedic view of the Arya Samaj. Now, please understand that this does not mean that Swamiji was wrong in any way. However, circumstances have changed 150 years later, and he himself has encouraged us to change, reform, and transform without obviously compromising our fundamental principles. In the past, Swamiji had to enter into what I call damage control in a more rigorous manner to awaken people from the lack of knowledge and blind faith. Today, people have access to this knowledge, and people have the choice to choose their mode and form of worship and belief. More so, through interfaith dialogue, we also understand deeper interpretations of their religious texts and similarities they draw from the Vedic viewpoint. If we understand and heed to Swamiji's caution at the foundation level of the Samaj in 1875, then would it not then be our responsibility to now rationally go through the information we have and developments and reforms taking place through society to then reform our approach to these topics where relevant and necessary in the 21st century? The question we need to ask ourselves is, are these modes and form of beliefs and worship contributing to good, pure, and righteous individuals that are beneficial for the prosperity of society, or do they oppress and subjugate? Further, we need to ask, Could our criticism be regarded as discrimination because their mode of worship and belief is different from ours, regardless of the fact that both may contribute to a healthy society? Because if so, then we are not achieving our objective, but going against our very own teachings. See, my friends, ours is to provide the education and offer the Vedic path and insights to people as understood and taught by Swamiji. Should they choose to lean in a bit more, then we have more than adequate platforms to nurture their interest and develop them. More so, our approach needs to be in developing righteous human characters, not increase our membership. Though nothing is wrong with that, but the Samaj is not a clan. Again, it's a movement set to achieve a higher, larger global objective. We must deeply honor and respect our forefathers for promoting, for example, the Hindi language and keeping Hindi alive in South Africa through their own efforts and through such institutions which they have established, such as the Hindi Pathshalas and eventually the Hindi Shiksha Sangh, mooted by our dear Pandit Nardevji. However, as a Samaj today, we have to reevaluate our priority to ensure that the mandate of the Samaj, in the context of both the 21st century and South Africa alike, is taken into consideration. Swamiji emphasized the need of Hindi due to the threat of a foreign language taking over a majority. Swamiji himself was proficient in Sanskrit and Gujarati and wasn't too proficient in Hindi to begin with. However, he realized this was the language of the masses and was needed to deliver his message effectively and efficiently in a way that would make an impact and create change. Here in South Africa, would our approach be to keep a language alive when it is not deeply understood by the current generation? Now, whilst I'm not saying that our mother tongue should not be promoted, I'm saying that the platform of the Samaj should be to build character and spiritual progress in an ailing world. This is the call of the Vedas. Even in the practice and promotion of our 16 sanskars and the Havan or Yajna, of which the Arya Samaj is well known for, we must expand beyond the symbolism and into the practical application, for only then will it make sense and be meaningful for those who should see it as a moment of transformation and character building, rather than just a checkbox to confirm that they've appeased their parents and Paramatma by performing this ceremony, or feel that only then will their prayers be answered. No. Sanskars are there to mold character, mold our behavior, and help us understand each stage of our development in this life. But it cannot be done if it remains in an approach that is more ritualized than it is to understand the development of each stage in a language that those who are engaged in it can interpret. And I'm not talking about a mere discourse. I mean an afternoon with tea and deep discussion on the way forward for each stage. Whilst the actual vidhi may be done, unless and until we counsel individuals or families or couples during each stage on what that particular sanskar is meant to do, how they meant to undergo the next stage, taking their circumstances into consideration, the sanskars will be merely symbolic, ritualistic, and not practical. We can't keep on performing vivahas when 3 months down the line there are divorces or affairs. The real sanskar is developing those people, developing the couple, and developing our families. Again, Swamiji says in his statement of beliefs on Yajna, Yajna is a term, now I'm quoting, Yajna is a term covering all actions done for showering or showing reverence to men of learning, scientific inventions and their application, all the chemical processes, all educational activities and charities, all the performances of Agnihotra or Homa for the purification of air, rain, water, and herbs for the increase of human happiness. I regard yajnas as excellent things. But Swamiji refuted two extreme views. The first view was that Havan is a useless ceremony and should be given up. And the second being that Havan is the alpha and omega of our belief system or practices, and salvation depends exclusively on it. Swamiji says that the word yajna means good in all action. A moral life and not rituals or superstitions is the means to salvation. It upholds the sovereignty of moral living over meaningless conventions. Unquote. Yes, Havan has its place, but it also has its meaning. It represents one portion of development. But we as a Samaj are responsible for providing the path to a complete development. It must stop being something mechanical and blindly mandatory, but rather transformative. In South Africa, we have not yet made inroads to other linguistic and cultural diasporas within the Hindu community, let alone outside our racial borders. We must ask ourselves, how open are we to change our approach to welcome other communities without them having to conform to one tradition, culture, or language over their own within our halls or programs? Remember, the Vedas are beyond our diversities because it is universal, and our mandate is back to the Vedas. My friends, if we don't find answers to these questions, our stagnation will only deepen. Nonetheless, the first part is a peek into how we can adapt Swamiji's message, spiritually speaking, here in South Africa in the 21st century. But briefly, the second aspect is our practical and social application. Thus far, the Arya Samaj in South Africa has worked tirelessly on the social front. It has also worked on the spiritual side as equally. However, our social mark needs to be far larger and more impactful. As Swamiji was a fierce defender of human rights, social justice, and applying the Vedas as a guide to ensuring proper governance, education, social structure, etc., etc. Our responsibility is to understand the Vedas as a manual for practical living and spiritual evolution, and not just a ritual practice to communicate with God and attain wealth and wishes, or a saving grace during trying times. Vedas is a practical living in every sphere of life. Actually, it is the bridge between social, scientific, and spiritual living. And this is where it becomes a way of life. Therefore, when the world is engulfed in many controversies, violence, and instability, the path shown by Swamiji can instill hope amongst our people. Here in South Africa, our challenges expand to poverty, unemployment, corruption, political instability, collapse of infrastructure to provide basic services such as education, amenities like water and lights, health services, gender-based violence, drugs and alcohol abuse, leading to a crippling economy. The rolling effects of these challenges amount to communities and individuals that are struggling to survive and make ends meet and resort to unfortunate measures to keep afloat. This compromises the rights of people, their dignity, their freedom, their progress, and their growth. Now more than ever, as a voice for the people and society, as an institution, serious engagement, my friends, needs to take place to determine how we as a Samaj can address or add our voice to these problems so as to tackle them head on. And let's not forget the challenges faced by the LGBTQ community, which the Arya Samaj South Africa proudly addressed in 2016. But almost 10 years later, we are yet to develop ways to educate and assist our families and the broader community in understanding and accepting and allowing the space for safe and deep discussions around what this means and how Vedic injunctions address this, so as to build a more equal and embracing human family. Yes, we may have issues about manpower, but even just a voice can be raised. We have sufficient human resources and educated professionals to incorporate a think tank whose sole focus should be the Arya Samaj for social change in South Africa, putting the 4th to 9th principles, the majority of our principles, into effective and efficient action. And it's not about saying, this is what the Vedas say, but rather putting forward constructive and achievable solutions based on Vedic teachings, and being courageous and persistent enough to make the change happen. When governance fails its people, we must be courageous and Vedic enough to hold our leaders to account, because they are our leaders and are accountable to their citizens. Swamiji, in his treatise on Raj Dharma in the Satya Prakash, details the structure and purpose of a government as per Yajurved dictums. It is the duty of every Arya to uphold the constitutional rights of our people and the country that they are the citizens of. Swamiji's life and message calls upon us to be active and engaged citizens for the welfare of every sentient being. And this requires us to take a stand whenever and wherever necessary. Further, we must develop social tools to encourage our communities to not just complain and wait for change, but to take initiative and to help themselves succeed. These tools will be aimed at community development and transformation so that whilst the bigger fight goes on, we don't lose our people and particularly our youth in the interim. My friends, if we can transform our Samaj towards this direction, we will become, as Swamiji envisioned, a vehicle for both spiritual and social change for all. That one day the people will look at the Arya Samaj and say, Arey, this is not an Indian thing. This is a human vehicle for change, spiritual, social, and the bridge between the both. We will be out there, visible and vocal, branded as citizens of the country we belong to, no matter which country that may be, for the welfare of the community that we were born into. This will truly achieve the dictum Krinvanto Vishwam Aryam. But as I always conclude by saying, we cannot go out and achieve Krinvanto Vishwam Aryam unless we ourselves become Arya, unless we live the values and principles. Can we truly say as members, let alone leaders, that we truly subscribe to the 10 principles of an organization whose blood runs through our veins? Or were we just born into an Arya Samaj family? Being a member is no admission, it's a statistic. Being an Arya is by heart, mind, and spirit, breathing compassion, love, oneness, and revolution. Ask ourselves, how much of the message are we living before we complain about the person sitting next to us? My friends, I hope I've given you enough to start a conversation on how the mission truly applies to us in SA and to any part of the world, and the direction we need to take for the next 100 years going forward. With all the love, light, and peace of my heart always. Namaste.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was a lot to take in. Very profound, very thought-provoking. Another 100 years. Hopefully that 100 years would start now with one single step. I loved that you said this, our Samaj is not a clan. It definitely is not a clan, and we need to work towards taking it out of that clannish thoughts that we have. And you also spoke about the law of the country we reside in being implemented. Swamiji, what comes first, dharma or the law of your country? Because I've been told law is above all.
A very important question, Vishekaji. So remember, if we really look at the base of law, base of our constitution is the Charter on Human Rights, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, Karunaji and a few others are more, they know more on the political sphere. So the fundamentals of human rights are there, and that is what the Vedas speak about. The problem lies is that certain laws contradict those fundamental human rights. And that's where we need to make a stand. No matter it might be the law, doesn't mean that we can't stand up and says that it violates our fundamental human rights, number one. Number two is we've also got to be, that's why Swamiji speaks about critical and rational thinking, is to really take that, whatever we may have an issue with, and break it down. What was the thinking behind it? Why was that law promulgated? And if necessary, after rational examination, nothing stops us, because again, dharma is that fundamental human basis. And this is transcending culture, tradition, and all that stories. This is going to the heart of humanism. And I may be mistaken, but I don't think there is a sort of truly lawful country whose fundamental basis is not humanity. It's just the subsequent laws that sort of put that aside sometimes that we need to stand up and fight for. Otherwise, we wouldn't be facing the world we are today. But dharma ultimately is first, because that's ultimately should be the basis of law. And again, Swamiji speaks about it in Raj Dharma. What creates that foundation of a structured society? You see? And remember, I mean, I always get, frequently I get asked the question, particularly from those in the police force, Swamiji, we have to pull out triggers sometimes, we have to engage in these things. It is adharmic, we're not allowed to take a life. And I said, no. Read Vedas properly. Because and forgive me, I always remember this quote from Lord of the Rings. It says, it's not about not knowing when to take a life, but when to spare a life. What are you doing that for? You are protecting something greater. You are protecting something which will need you then to take up your arms and fight. And the Vedas does give us guidance on how to do that. But I hope that answers your question in short.
Okay, no, protecting something greater. So, maybe that's where the dharma comes in.
Correct.
Okay. I would like to open the floor for questions and comments. Either raise your hands or post it on the chat. I see we have a comment here. There's greetings from Aneshji, Devika Ramesar, and Pandit Aarti Shannon. Arya Samaj cannot take ownership of the Vedas. I like this. It's the one I also made note of. So that's a nice one. Okay, I see Aneshji. You can unmute and go ahead.
Thank you.
with your
Namaste,
question.
Swamiji.
Namaste, Aneshji.
Swamiji, I agree with you. Arya Samaj cannot take ownership of the Vedas. But I think also if we look back at the time when Swami Dayanand actually started the movement of the Arya Samaj, I think it made us maybe a custodian, not the custodian of the Vedas, because at that time as well, I think his thing was back to the Vedas, because in that time people had lost direction as well to a certain degree. And I think that's a critical part. But I agree that basically humanity is an integral part of everything, and especially when you involve in activism and stuff like that. But if we look at what's happening in the world today, and even specifically within the sphere of the Hinduism or the Hindutva type of movement that is coming out, which is like anti-Muslim sometimes and anti-this, that is not humanity that the Vedas preach. And it's almost like the entire world is moving right in terms of it. And yes, Arya Samaj is not large and our voices need to be heard. But sometimes there's a disparity, because even within the Arya Samaj community in South Africa, there are followers of or people of the Arya Samaj affiliate that believe in the Hindutva things, and it's a conflict to me, because when you actually are inhuman to any suffering in the world, then I think it's a problem to anyone who follows the Vedas. I don't know if you want to comment further on that,
No,
but
yeah. Now I've taken your 3 points. So once you're done, then I can
okay.
sort of
Thank you.
Thank you, Anish. Okay, so firstly, on your point of custodian, I hear what you say. Personally, in a way, I differ from the thinking, only because Vedas is Vedas. That is Aparushaya. Cannot be held by any institution or individual. Yes, we are given a responsibility to take what we believe to be the correct interpretation of the Vedas and spread it to the world, because it is an interpretation that truly reflects the all-embracing nature and non-contradictive nature of the message that comes directly from Paramatman. But also to say custodian also lends some sort of ownership to it. For me, I would go forward to say rather we are responsible over translating or translaying the correct interpretation of a knowledge that will expand even beyond the creation of this world and the destruction of this world that always exists. That's number one. Number two is, yes, indeed, we are at a time where, even within the understanding of Hindu Dharma, we are in a shift where we see the ideal of what the Vedas portray as humanity, rather, and you have a growing number of or a growing thought process that is engaging in a more vigorous approach to protecting the form of Hinduism as we see today, which includes the culture, tradition, and linguistic element. Now, the reason I say this requires a really larger conversation is because to determine a way forward and where we fit as a Samaj is to ask ourselves, where is that thought process stemming from? What is the understanding behind it? Why so much of resentment and possibly hate towards a particular community? Once we understand that, we can step back to say, is our response to what may be historical going against the grain of what our Vedas teach us? Or is there an alternative method of addressing the past so as to move together collectively? Because again, it's not about right wing or left wing, because both can have equal extremes. It's about finding the central dharmic ground that enables us to understand that we are not infallible. We will make errors. There's a deep-rooted history to which many feel aggrieved about, and there's a future to which many want to protect. How can we find a common ground to which we can all live together in harmony, not repeating the past, whilst protecting our future? Again, those extremes are unfortunately creating instability, and partly that's what we need to raise our voice against, not one against the other, but coming together and having a dialogue. Why? I tell you, there's so much sometimes that we can understand and allay fears and suspicion around just by talking and understanding. It doesn't mean the one is right and the one is wrong, but it enables us to understand and find a way forward. Because I agree, the hate must end. All communities, like I said in the introduction of when I was speaking, all of us have a right to exist within the compounds of our forms of worship and belief. But it's how we are doing this together so as not to sort of infiltrate each other, target each other, but work with it together is going to be the key. And that's where this whole talk about interfaith harmony comes into question. Because, again, if we look at the Satya Prakash, the ending chapters, I've had a conversation, an uncomfortable conversation before, where certain questions were raised. How do you address it? Because circumstances have changed. So yes, there's much which we need to talk about as a Samaj, what our sort of reformed vision is moving forward, and then how we take these other issues and deal with them as a collective society. And then thirdly, I just wanted to raise, if we look at the term Hindutva, I always say forget Hindutva and work towards Ekatva, oneness. Because the term Hindu, which was given to us yesterday, is not even got nothing to do with Sanatana Vedic Dharma. Hinduism includes Dharma plus language plus tradition plus culture. We have to go back to the heart of Sanatana Vedic Dharma, and that takes us to Ekatva. But I hope in some way that gives some sort of comment to what you say.
Thanks, Swamiji. It does. While remember, I used the word a custodian just to say that we are not the sole custodian, definitely.
Sure.
But remember, you have to have maybe a little bit of ownership to propagate it as well. Or
let's rather say we've got the custodian over the sort of Swami Dayanand's view or interpretation of the Vedas. Then that is more ideal.
Absolutely. But I think, I agree with you. There's lots of profound discussions that we need to make, both on this, even on like climate justice. There's a multifold of matters that actually the Samaj, even if we just restrict ourselves just looking at the 10 principles, I think there's a lot of work still to be done.
Correct. My topic, my actual paper was an hour long. it had climate change and all these things, but I said we've discussed it before. Let's try to hone a bit differently. But I agree, there's so much. But the thing is, Aneshji, we have to sit down and constructively engage and move forward. Otherwise, it remains another YouTube video, which we have to find another way to address or speak on a yield down the line, you know.
No, I totally agree. I think maybe one part of our centenary celebration, and like you said, the next 100 years, and more likely you will be around much longer than most of us. But but I think we need to have a strategic path to actually to work us towards the next 100 years, and it's something critical that we need to look at.
Correct, agreed.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we have, sorry, I think this is Karuna ji, Arya Samaj South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to perhaps put another dimension to the whole thing of custodian ownership. I think what we need to promote is Vedic socialism. The Vedas has a lot about socialism, and then the whole issue of ownership actually falls away, because it's actually about people owning things and taking
Correct.
charge of their own lives. Swamiji, there's just a few things I wanted to add to this. Swami Dayanand, Maharishi Dayanand actually gave a sociological interpretation of the Vedas.
Correct.
And that's what made him a modern person, a reformer.
Correct.
And I think that's where the Arya Samaj's edge actually comes.
Mhm.
Now, there's a lot about scientific thinking in this. There's a lot about being very modern. But, I want to come to other people who actually look at the Vedas. Now, there's a mantra, I can't remember the whole mantra, but it is Na Tasya Pratima
Tasya
Asti.
Pratima Asti. Ji.
Now, there are people who do the ucharan and they actually say Natasya Pratima Asti. Now, there's a very big difference between Natasya Pratima Asti
And
and
Natasya.
Natasya Pratima Asti.
Absolutely.
And, when we studied with Swami Dayanand, he taught us how to actually break it up and deal with it and really get going with it. So,
Correct.
I want to come to the point that we have a gem in Bhai Rambilas,
Mhm.
and we're not making adequate use of it. Now, that takes me to the next point I want to make. And that is that one of the things that's missing in the Arya Samaj is the debate and the discussion. And if we're not going to have debate and discussion, nobody is going to grow. The Arya Samaj won't be able to develop its voice, and you're not going to grow. So somewhere along the line, this issue of having rich debate and dissension, disagree with each other, but you get to what Marx calls the antithesis of a debate. You come to a new point. Swamiji, the last point I want you to speak around is this issue of the think tank that you raised. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about what you view this think tank to be?
So for me, this think tank needs to focus solely on the practical social elements of the Vedas and what Swamiji's social mission was. All the points and much more, which I've stipulated from the second aspect, dealing with all the current social challenges that we face here, politically, socially, economically, etc., leading to global challenges. We need individuals that are solely dedicated and experienced and educated in those fields to sit around how we can not just say, this is what the Veda says about X, Y, and Z. We know that. But based on these Vedic ideals, these are solutions as an Arya Samaj we can put forward and advocate towards making changes in areas that require a voice or maybe necessary changes in all fields. So for me, this think tank becomes the social engine of an institution that expands beyond the sort of ritual side or for me spirituality and social is one language speaking to each other because it's got to be based on the one, but it moves away from, call it, the SOVS type work and taking the SOVS type work and the Yajic work, etc., and putting it into social change and action. But it can only be with individuals that are experienced and have the knowledge necessary to take it forward, train others, and engage to be out there, be the voice, make the difference, so that people look and say, this Samaj is not just an Indian thing or a Hindu thing. This is a train or a machine of social change. That's my thought process around this think tank. Solutions driven.
Okay, thank you, Karunaji. We had Pandit Aarti Shannon's hand up. Are you still at Pandit Aarti?
Namaste, Visheka. I put it down because I was wondering if I could speak.
We
So,
could do it quickly because we are running out of time. So if you could quickly.
Namaste, Swamiji.
Namaste, Aarti. Namaste.
Thank you very much for a very, very wonderful talk. What I wanted to say was when we spoke about the ownership of the Vedas, you know, we must stop thinking that way. We must start thinking around the teachings, and we must start building communities. We must reach out, you know, to our own communities, our own little communities. And once we
Agreed.
start building those communities, we will encounter, you know, relationships with people of different religious backgrounds and different religious groups. And that's the only way we can spread the word of the Vedas. I'm actually experiencing that now with all my interfaith work that I'm doing.
Agreed.
And I've been busy the whole week in spite of my not being able to speak, but I've been, you know, listening in and giving them my opinions on the chats. And then,
Excellent.
you know, once we start doing that, we can start also getting in the youth
Yes.
who would be more interested not in religion. They don't want to be interested in religion.
Yeah.
We need to get them interested in work like what the Heal does.
Correct.
You know, they need to be out there doing practical work. Let's get them to start planting trees. Let's explain to them about the environment. Let's talk about what's happening in the communities that don't have water and don't have lights. And that's the kind of work we need to start doing. And that's what I wanted
Agreed.
to say. Thank you, Swamiji.
Agreed. Completely agreed, Aarti. Definitely spot on.
Thank you, Panditji. We are running out of time. Unfortunately, this topic can continue. It's very vast. I would like to say thank you, Swamiji. It's been a very informative, thought-provoking presentation that you have made for us today. And hopefully we can implement these thoughts that you have put through to us. And I want to say thank you to you. I wish to say thank you to Vedniketan for this entire year and the last few years for bringing us such profound speakers and the knowledge of the Vedas. Before we do close, I would like, this being the last lecture for the year, I would like to call upon Pandit Shobhana Singh, who is the chairperson of Vedniketan, to say a few words on behalf of the Vedniketan before we close for the year. And I would like to wish everybody a safe festive season. Be responsible, take care. Pandit Shobhana ji, over to you. And if you could please finish off with Shanti Path for us, and then we will close this program for the year after you say a few words. Thank you. Namaste.
All this evening. I wish to place on record that we have organized these lectures as we have moved away from hosting conferences, and it is through these Zoom lectures that we are able to reach out to people all over the world. I take pleasure in thanking all the speakers, both local speakers as well as those that have presented internationally. We are proud to have had presenters from USA, Mauritius, India, and the United States, as well as other countries. This allows us to reach people globally and connect and educate each other on various topics. Next year, 2025, sees the 150th anniversary of the APS and the 200th year of Swami Dayanand's teachings. With this in mind, we have planned excellent topics and have invited speakers. We invite you to join us on the series of Back to the Vedas on every third Wednesday of each month. From the team, we wish to thank you for attending all our past Zoom lectures, and we hope that this has enlightened and brightened your life and intellect. We thank you and look forward to 2025. Thank you, Visheka Bhenji. I hand over to you to round up.
Okay, Shobha Benji, would you do the Shanti part?
Shekaji, I think you should do it.
Okay, sure. Okay, sure. Okay, let's bow our heads and we would chant Shanti part. Om Dyo Shantirantariksham Shantihi Prithivi Shantirapaha Shantiroshadhayah Shantihi Vanaspatayah Shantirvishwe Devaः Shantirbrahma Shantihi Sarvam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Namaste. Thank you everybody for tuning in.
Namaste.